Have you ever wondered how administrators enforce a password complexity on the data power? In fact, let's go back to the basic question. How do somebody log in to the data power? You saw me logging with admin user credentials over here, and those are the credentials which are stored on the data power itself. But what if as an administrator, I have to integrate data power with maybe an LDAP system in such a way that users present in the LDAP system should be able to log on to the data power? If you have these questions, then this video is for you. Without further a delay, let's get started with the concept of RBM policy in the data power. In the search box, let's type RBM settings. RBM stands for role-based management, and this controls exactly what we discussed. You have an authentication tab. Now this tab controls how a user will be able to log on to the data power. For example, in the current setting, you can see the authentication mechanism is local user, which means that only users created on data power locally will be able to log on. And then you have some additional attributes associated with them. What if we want data power to connect with LDAP and we want users to come from LDAP and then they should be able to log in? Well, in that case, you can choose here LDAP. The moment you choose here the LDAP, you will have to provide the LDAP based credential. So LDAP, see, you can make it as complex as you want, or you can keep it as simple as you want, right? So here, if you look at LDAP, it's basically a database. It's a network database. It's not a relational database. So we deal with LDAP in a different way. But the idea is very simple. It's a database which you have to connect to. And what do you need to connect to a database? Well, you need user ID, you need password, you need a server address, you need port number, and then perhaps you need one or more tables from which you want to extract the data. In case of LDAP, same thing is applicable. You have a host and port, which is basically an LDAP host port. You have a TLS proxy profile if it is uses LDAP S protocol. And then you have an LDAP prefix, suffix. So this LDAP prefix, suffix is basically to qualify logically the table which you want to read the data from. I know that some people might criticize this because LDAP is a network database, so it essentially does not have the table per se like a relational database has. But essentially, it has its trees and branches and sub-branches, and they logically act like a table. So you have a tree over here in the LDAP from which you want to fetch the data, and that logically acts like a table. So this prefix and suffix basically they together specify that particular branch or the particular tree that is there in the LDAP. So that is what the LDAP prefix suffixes are. And then once you do this, data power will try to connect with LDAP. Whatever user credentials are it got at the logon time, it is going to pass on to the LDAP, and LDAP can say yes or no, and accordingly the user will be liable to log in. But this screen alone will not do good for you if you wish to integrate data power with LDAP and you want your users to log on to it. You need another configuration, which we will talk in a moment. But before we go there, let's try to understand a scenario. The scenario is that somehow with some because of some reason, the LDAP connectivity between data power and the LDAP is broken. It might happen, right? So in that case, your data power will be completely inaccessible and you will not be able to log on to it, forget about making any changes. In those scenarios, the fallback scenario comes in. The fallback is local accounts to fallback. Here, you can specify certain accounts. Those accounts, they bypass the rule of LDAP authentication. And for them, the local authentication will be applicable. So it would be very useful if you say here for a specific users, and you can say, for example, admin over here. So what does this effectively means? It means that the admin user can still log on to the data power using their locally stored credential. So if you enter the user ID admin on the logon screen of the data power, it will not go to LDAP. It will try to look at the credential locally stored on the data power, and then it will try to authenticate that user and then will allow the login or not allow the login. This is a very useful feature that one should take advantage of if they are configuring the LDAP based authentication. Now comes the credential mapping. Yes. So I told you that this screen alone will not solve your problem if you intend to authenticate all your users using LDAP. It's a very useful mechanism. I mean, keeping users in LDAP and keeping them centrally over there, managing them centrally over there is a standard practice in the enterprise. And in almost all cases, if you are a data power administrator, the organization is going to tell you that the data power should connect with LDAP and should honor the credentials stored over there. But as I told you, this screen will alone not help you out. Next screen that you need to configure in this case is the credential mapping. So credential mapping is the screen where you have to select XML file. And here you need to provide an XML file URL. This XML file will contain user to role mapping, or what is allowed and not allowed for a user, right? So that is what is contained in the XML file. Once you have this over here, then together with authentication tab, you will be able to successfully allow user to use their LDAP credentials to log on to the data power. At the same time, they will have the right set of credentials to work inside the data power. Normally, the LDAP returns user groups. And here, under credential mapping in the XML file URL, you have to specify a mapping between the user group and what they can do and they cannot do. Right? So that is what the XML file URL is over here. Password policy. It defines the password policy. It says minimum length 6th, right? You can make it 10 if you wish. And then it has various other properties like required mixed case, non-alphanumeric, required. So you can customize your password policy over here. Now here is the account policy, which allows the administrator to restrict to serial ports. You know that data power has a serial port as well as data power has Ethernet port. So if you select it on, which means administrators would always be logging on using this serial port. Normally keep it off because this is troublesome. To connect to a serial port, you have to be in the data center, which you will not be all the time. So keeping it off makes sense. And there are additional control parameters over here, like for example, tolerance level. How many failed login attempts are tolerated? And would you like to log down the user for certain amount of time if they have a continuously failed attempt and so on. So this is what is over here. It also enforces RBM on the CLI. So you have a CLI way of connecting with the data power, which is command line interface. Would you like to enforce the RBM settings on the CLI? Currently, it is turned off. Effectively, it means, for example, that if you are a user, like you are a locally created user like ABC, and you wish to log on to the data power using the CLI, then you will not use your LDAP credential. You will use your local credential. That is what it means over here, right? And then SSH authentication using CLI sessions. So it provides you additional way in which you can connect with the data power over SSH. So it says CA signed user certificate or password or whatever the case may be in your case. So this is all about the RBM settings. This is a very useful setting for administrators, and there are many settings over here which are crucial for the operation of the data power. So use it carefully. That's all for this video. Thank you.